Everybody told Marcus he had nothing, no address, no lease, no future. But while the city was busy deciding where to sweep him next, Marcus was doing something that the $2,400 a month studio down the street could not do. He was staying warm, he was staying dry, he was staying hidden, and it cost him $400. Not $400 a month, $400. One time. For a rotting, waterlogged, completely forgotten boat that nobody wanted, sitting in a marina nobody visited, that he turned into the most efficient, self-contained, heated home you have never seen. The system told him he had failed. What he actually did was solve a problem the system never could. Nobody checked the water. That's the first thing you need to understand. Code enforcement officers, police on sweep detail, shelter bed counters, they all move in straight lines. They check the overpasses, they check the ravines, they check the parking lots and the alleys and the spaces under the highway. Nobody paddles out to check a weathered old boat anchored 50 yards offshore in the middle of a gray Tuesday morning. Nobody looks at the water, and Marcus figured that out in about 48 hours. Everything else he built from there. His name was Marcus Day. He was 41 years old and a former HVAC technician. He lost his apartment the month the company he worked for dissolved overnight, taking 3 weeks of his unpaid wages with it. He had spent 8 months cycling through shelters that had curfews he could not meet while working odd cash jobs, and tent camps that kept getting bulldozed by mid-morning before he could even fold his sleeping bag. He was not broken. He was not addicted. He was not mentally ill. He was a man with specific, serious technical skills and no address, which in this country means you are invisible until you are a problem. Marcus refused to be either. The boat cost him $400 off a marina bulletin board in a town I will not name on a stretch of water you have seen 100 times, driving past it on the interstate, a 1974 fiberglass sloop, 26 feet long, sitting low in the water on 2 cracked bilge pumps and a prayer. The hull was sound. Fiberglass from that era was built thick, almost recklessly so, because resin was cheap and engineers had not learned to be efficient yet. But everything else was rot. The interior was black with mildew. The port lights were cracked. The deck fittings leaked. The previous owner was a retired postal worker who had bought it with fantasies of coastal cruising and had not touched it in 11 years. He paid Marcus $300 to haul away some of the garbage inside it. So effectively, Marcus got the boat for $100 net, but we will keep saying $400, because even at $400, what he built next should embarrass every housing developer in America. So let me ask you something before we go any further. Have you ever looked at something most people throw away? A broken appliance, a stripped car, a gutted building, and thought, I could make something out of that? Have you ever had that instinct and then talked yourself out of it because someone told you the rules did not allow it? Drop that in the comments right now, because what Marcus did with that boat is about to make you realize that instinct was never wrong. The rules were just designed for someone else. And what you are about to discover will change how you think about shelter, warmth, and what it actually takes to build a home. Here is what most people think a home requires: a foundation, utilities, a landlord's signature, an address registered with a municipality. They think warmth requires a gas line or an electric meter, and that insulation means rolls of pink fiberglass stapled between studs by licensed contractors who pull permits and charge accordingly. They think safety means a lock on a door in a building that the city has approved. And if you do not have those things, if you cannot afford the first month, last month, and security deposit, then the modern housing system's answer to you is a shelter cot, 3 rules, and a 9 p.m. curfew. That is the full extent of the modern solution. And for millions of people, it does not work. Not because those people are broken, but because that solution was never actually designed around them. It was designed around liability, around inspection schedules, around the comfort of administrators who need the problem to fit inside a spreadsheet. You were handed a broken system and then blamed for not thriving inside it. Here is where it gets interesting, because the system that could not solve Marcus's problem had already given him every tool he needed to solve it himself. And what he built in the next 6 weeks was not primitive. It was not desperate. It was, by any honest measure, engineering. The first problem was the hull moisture. 11 years of a cracked deck means 11 years of water finding its way into the balsa core between the fiberglass skins, and wet core is dead. It does not insulate, it does not support load, and in winter it conducts cold like a copper pipe. Marcus knew this from HVAC work, where he had spent years dealing with building envelopes and thermal bridges. A thermal bridge is what happens when a conductive material punches through an insulating layer, like a metal screw through a foam panel, and carries heat from the warm side directly to the cold side. Your body heat goes straight out. The outside cold comes straight in. The wall looks solid. It is actually a colander. That is what that hole was. So before Marcus put a single piece of insulation inside that boat, he spent 2 weeks drilling and injecting. Every cavity he could reach, he filled with expanding 2-part polyurethane foam, the same product used in commercial refrigeration. $7 a can at the hardware store. He went through 22 cans. He drilled, injected, waited for the foam to cure and expand, then moved 6 inches over and did it again. By the time he was done, that hull had a continuous thermal barrier running from the waterline to the deck. Cold water on one side, warm, foam-filled silence on the other. Think of it like wrapping the inside of a cooler with another cooler. The cold simply had nowhere to enter. If you are finding this valuable, take 2 seconds and hit that like button, because what Marcus did next is the part that most survival guides completely miss. The second problem was heat generation without electricity, without propane tanks that needed refilling, and without fire, because an open flame in a fiberglass boat is how a $400 home becomes a Coast Guard incident report. Marcus's solution was a small, marine-grade diesel drip heater, not a propane heater, not a kerosene heater, a diesel drip stove, the kind used on North Sea fishing boats for decades, the kind Scandinavian sailors installed in the 1960s and the 1970s, because they worked in conditions where everything else failed. It burns a controlled drip of diesel fuel, less than 1/4 liter per hour at low settings, through a pot burner with a chimney stack that vents through the existing engine exhaust port. No pressurized tank, no explosive gas, just a controlled, steady, nearly silent combustion that produces enough heat to raise the interior of a 26-foot cabin by 30 degrees Fahrenheit above the ambient outside temperature. Marcus sourced a used unit from a maritime salvage yard for $60. He installed it in an afternoon. And here is the part that should make you angry. This technology has existed for over 70 years. It is cheap, reliable, efficient, and safe, and it is used everywhere in the world except in the places where the people who need it most are told they are not allowed to have it. Because here's the reality. The reason Marcus and thousands of people like him ended up without shelter in the first place is not a failure of individual will. It is the deliberate, systematic replacement of affordable housing stock with asset class real estate. Between 1970 and 2020, the United States lost roughly 4.7 million low-rent housing units, units renting for under $600 a month in today's dollars. Not because those buildings fell down, but because they were bought, renovated, and repriced for a different market. The people who lived in them were not offered alternatives. They were offered waiting lists and intake forms and the suggestion that they should perhaps make better choices. The system did not fail them accidentally. It was restructured around them and then pointed at them as evidence of their own inadequacy. Marcus did not lose his apartment because he made bad decisions. He lost it because the company above him made one, and the apartment market below him had no floor. That is not a personal failure. That is an architectural one. The third layer of what Marcus built was arguably the most sophisticated: condensation management. This is the invisible killer in any small, enclosed living space, and it is the reason most improvised shelters fail within months. When warm, moist air from cooking, breathing, and heating contacts a cold surface, it gives up its moisture as liquid water. Inside an unventilated boat cabin, that moisture collects on every surface, seeps into cushions, destroys wood, breeds mold, and eventually makes the space uninhabitable. Marcus knew this. He had seen it destroy buildings from the inside in his HVAC work. His solution was a passive dehumidification system using calcium chloride, the same compound used in road de-icing, packed into mesh bags hung at 4 points in the cabin. Calcium chloride is hygroscopic, meaning it pulls moisture from the air, the way a sponge pulls water from a countertop, except it does it continuously, silently, and without any power source. Each bag lasts about 3 weeks before it dissolves into brine and needs replacing. A 5-pound bag costs $4. Marcus spent $16 a month keeping his air dry. The interior of that cabin smelled like wood and diesel and coffee. It did not smell like mold. It never smelled like mold. He cooked on a single-burner alcohol stove vented through a cracked port light. He collected rainwater through a modified deck fitting and filtered it through a ceramic gravity filter, the kind used in rural communities across sub-Saharan Africa and Southeast Asia, proven over decades to remove 99.9% of bacterial contamination without power, without chemicals, without a subscription. He used a 12-volt battery bank charged by a 40-watt solar panel, zip-tied to the deck to power LED lighting, and a small radio. His monthly ongoing costs for diesel, calcium chloride, alcohol fuel, and food ran to approximately $90. $90 a month for a warm, dry, functioning home that no one checked. No landlord, no lease, no curfew, no intake paperwork, no list. Now, why do we not talk about why none of this is part of the official conversation about homelessness? Because the answer to that question is where the real story lives. The shelter system in America is not structured around solving homelessness. It is structured around managing it within a framework that preserves the existing housing market, the existing social service industry, and the existing political arrangements around both. Permanent supportive housing, the model most advocates push for, costs between $300,000 and $500,000 per unit to build in major cities. That number is not an accident. It reflects the full weight of land cost, labor cost, regulatory compliance, and institutional overhead. Every dollar of that $500,000 goes somewhere, and none of it goes to the person sleeping outside tonight. A $60 diesel heater and 22 cans of expanding foam are not part of that budget. They are not even in the conversation. Because they do not require a budget, they require knowledge. And knowledge that solves the problem without feeding the system is the kind of knowledge that tends to stay quiet. So here is what you can take from Marcus's story, whether you are facing housing pressure yourself or you know someone who is. First, if you are near any coastal or inland waterway, check the marina bulletin boards and the free listings on community apps. Boats in the $200 to $800 range exist and appear regularly. Old fiberglass vessels from the 1960s and 1970s are often structurally sound where it counts. The hull is your floor, walls, and roof in one piece. What is rotted is almost always cosmetic or mechanical, and both are fixable. Look for bargains, not showpieces. Second, if you are considering a small space, a van, a camper, a boat, or a shed, learn the thermal bridge principle before you put up a single sheet of insulation. Spray foam before bats. Continuous barrier before framing. It costs less to do it right the first time than to heat a space where cold is finding a dozen invisible paths inside. Prioritize insulation and continuous barriers. Third, if you want to test whether a space is livable before committing anything, spend $40 on a calcium chloride dehumidifier test, a battery-powered thermometer with a humidity gauge, and one night of observation. If the humidity stays below 60% and the temperature holds above 55 degrees by morning, your thermal envelope is working. If it does not, you know exactly where to focus. These are not difficult tests. They are simply tests that no one in the official housing conversation has any interest in teaching you. Remember, simple tests beat expensive solutions when they are done correctly. Marcus lived on that boat for 14 months. He left not because he was discovered or displaced, but because he found work, saved money, and eventually signed a lease on a small studio apartment 2 towns over. He stripped the boat down carefully before he left, removed the diesel heater, left the foam and the fittings intact, and sold it to another man he had met at the marina for $600, $200 more than he had paid. He did not consider himself a genius. He considered himself a person who had been given no good options and therefore had looked carefully at the bad ones until he found one that worked. That is not desperation, that is engineering. That is the kind of problem solving that built everything around you before the industrial world decided the only valid solutions were the ones you could buy in a store. Marcus was not a symbol of what happens when the system fails. He was a demonstration of what becomes possible when someone refuses to wait for the system to succeed. The knowledge was not lost. It was just never given to the people who needed it most. If this story made you think differently about what a home actually is and about what warmth actually requires, then subscribe, because that is exactly what this channel is built to do. Every week we dig into the solutions that exist outside the official conversation, the methods that work, the materials that have always worked, the knowledge that was quietly made irrelevant by industries that profit from your dependency on them. We are uncovering what the housing market, the shelter industry, and the comfort economy left behind. And we want to hear from you. Tell us in the comments, what is a space or a resource most people overlook that you think could actually solve a real problem? Tell us what you would investigate next, because there are 1,000 more Marcus days out there, and they deserve better tools than the ones they have been handed.